Welcome to Just Relationships, the show that offers you concrete ways to make your relationships better. Whether it's your boss, your spouse, your children, or your friends, the quality of your relationships in life directly affects how you feel about yourself and the success you achieve. Your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer, a psychotherapist, telecoach, author, and seminar leader, will interview top experts to help you learn to manage this essential part of your life. And now, here's your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer.
Greetings to you. We know that so many relationships fail. We know that people who are in love and have so much hope, somehow the relationships fizzle out. And you ask yourself, what happened? What happened? And just to let you know, there is in the field of marital counseling, there is a term called the power struggle stage, which comes after the honeymoon stage. And then if we get through the power struggle stage, which many people do not, obviously, we move into the us stage, the true deep friends and lovers stage. So, but what goes wrong? Well, I have a best-selling author with me today. I'm so pleased to share with you Matthew Fray, who is the author of This Is How Your Marriage Ends, a hopeful approach to saving relationships. Welcome, Matthew Fray.
Thank you so much for having me.
I was very intrigued when I read the article from your book, and the whole idea of it's the little things, right? So people say, like even me as a marital therapist, I would say, it's not the doorknob you're fighting over. It's not the faucet dripping. It's not the toilet paper being changed. It's deeper than that. Let's take a deep dive. And you really knocked me off my socks when you said, it is those things. And what do they mean, right? What is the meaning of who changes the toilet paper roll, or what the proverbial toothpaste, as you say in your book, your wife asking you a zillion times to put the dishes in the dishwasher, and you thinking that's not a big deal, and why would she not love me if I don't put the dishes in the dishwasher? So I think I've said enough. Tell me why you wrote the book, why it's so important to you, and why it should be so important to many married folks.
I wrote the book because my marriage ended approximately a decade ago, and I had a really hard time with it. I had never experienced, I don't think, significant adversity unless someone wanted to count my parents splitting when I was 4. But all of the interpersonal hardships that I'd experienced were directly related to divorce. I could trace all of the things that were the worst moments of my life and all of the trickle-down effect, like moments or the emotional consequences, so to speak, were all wrapped up in divorce. And when my parents split, I was a little kid and I just thought people sometimes don't get along, they fight, they weren't right for each other. Maybe some bad things happened that I didn't know about. But I got married and I picked somebody that I thought was a really responsible partner. We loved one another. We had, I think, the requisite amount of respect and shared values. And no one did anything like overtly awful the way that I imagined marriages ending. Critical relationships, like where what I've come to call major marriage crimes, the obvious stuff, infidelity, physical abuse, verbal abuse, gambling away the family savings, these things where if you told the story to someone, they'd say, oh, that makes so much sense. That's awful that happened to them. But what I believe is that we slowly erode, fracture trust over time in our relationships in the absence of these major marriage crimes, these little teeny tiny moments that people don't calculate for being harmful. And I don't think in a vacuum, any isolated incident is harmful. I think it's the collection over 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, that very slowly erodes trust in relationships and results usually in one, but sometimes both people thinking after enough time together, I'm not going to choose this anymore. Like, this is not what I signed up for. And I believe that trust is eroded because of behaviors that you and I, that the average human being doesn't calculate to be bad. And that to me is the danger. We go about our day doing what we think is perfectly okay or even the right thing. And then we're inadvertently doing or not doing things which can result in trust erosion in relationships. So why do I write the book? To me, it was like I felt like I uncovered an important truth about human behavior, and I didn't know how to see it before. And I felt like I found like a vocabulary to talk about it. And I just want to think of it like a warning sign, so to speak. People can't know to be vigilant about something if they're unaware it's even something that might harm them or cause problems to the people they love. So that's what this is about.
Wow, Matthew, thank you. So, it's interesting when we look at people's idiosyncrasies and we say, oh, it's just an idiosyncrasy. She doesn't put dishes in the dishwasher. So I have to accept. So good marriage is about acceptance of the partner. Don't ask them to change. Just accept that that's an idiosyncrasy. Okay. And you're saying, which I say in other ways, not pertaining to this kind of thing. That's why I find it so fascinating, but that we do have to stretch for our partner and we do have to accommodate and get out of our comfort zone. How much we get out of our comfort zone is another story. As I say to my clients, we want to stretch out of our comfort zone, not yank ourselves out of our comfort zone. What is reasonable? What kind of change is it reasonable to ask someone? I know in the 12-step movement, people make amends for major harm. And then after that is all done and witnessed, then they make one of the 10th step is to make amends on a daily basis. Take an inventory, and we call that living amends. I'm not just apologizing, I'm changing. Yet people are so blind to these kinds of mishaps that they do over and over again. I love your word erodes, Matthew. The erosion, because erosion is slow. It's slow. The Chinese water torture or the death of 1,000 cuts. I think you may have made mention of that in your book, that it's cumulative. So, when you said in your book, I'm a pretty good guy, but I was a lousy husband. And you've had like almost a spiritual awakening. Not to quote another book, but I'm going to quote Dr. Harriet Lerner in her book, Why People Don't Apologize, or Why He Won't Apologize. The idea of men typically being more unapologetic than women. And so this is a generality that the male or somebody will not apologize and notice any kind of wrongdoings. But you did a major total about face. Now, short of seeing the light in the forest, short of seeing a great bright light in your room, what happened?
I think I needed to hurt on a level, this is speculation, commiserate with like my wife's hurt. So, right, she didn't end the marriage because she was disturbed. She ended the marriage because for a number of years, she felt pain, hurt, breakage because of things I was doing or not doing. And when I say not doing, I mean like not reacting to her requests for help, right? It's you talked about men not apologizing. I do think if we're going to speak in generalities and in the so-called heteronormative relationship, male-female relationship, it's often the female partner coming to the male partner, reporting dissatisfaction with some thing he's doing or not doing. And then there's often, I one of the foundational ideas in my work is this response pattern, this invalidating or defensive response pattern that men do. I think the man, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. He doesn't perceive himself to be bad. He doesn't perceive his actions to be harmful. And apologizing is tantamount to like admitting guilt to something he didn't do that's wrong. And he won't violate his sense of self and his principles by saying, I'm sorry that I did something that wasn't even bad. Like that's, I think, the thought process. And I used to do the exact same thing. When my marriage ended and I was suffering myself for having lost the most important thing in my life, my wife and my son, I had to go to work on self-preservation. I had to figure out how to protect myself, and it became unselfish over time, how to protect my loved ones from having something like this happen again. And I did it the way anybody would do anything. I read a lot of books. I talked to a lot of people. I did a lot of thinking, meditating, if you will, just like spending time thinking about all of these things. And I think that I finally landed on the explanation that makes sense. And that is, we can cause enormous harm without intending to cause harm. And that is the great disconnect, I think, in relationships. The man doesn't want to apologize because he didn't do anything wrong. And I'll stand up for him. I don't necessarily think he did anything wrong either. That's not what this is about. That doesn't mean harm wasn't experienced by his relationship partner. Pain could have been experienced. And so I want him to demonstrate care and concern and compassion and empathy and consideration about that idea. Because if she says, I hurt because of this thing that happened, and he refuses to do anything different moving forward, that erodes trust. It means I can't trust this person to show up for me tomorrow, next week, next month. Maybe even worse, I do trust that he will do things that hurt me. And over time, a healthy person will exit a relationship in which that's the condition. You said at the beginning of this conversation, the idea of, and I've heard it many times, and I have a mother who would say this very thing. She takes exception to my philosophies in this work. This idea of don't sweat the small stuff. This idea of who is going to let something as ridiculous. And it's like, I know where I got it. God love her. I know where I got it. I did think it was ridiculous. It's not about that, because there's billions of people on the planet and they're partnered up with billions of other people. And some percentage of them will care about the dish by the sink, and some percentage of them will not care about the dish by the sink. And I am saying it's not about the dish. It's about, does the presence of it cause pain for your partner? If it doesn't, good for you. But what happens elsewhere in your relationship that does cause pain that you don't perceive to be like a problem? In the instances of the partner where the dish causes pain, the choice is, I accept responsibility for protecting him or her from that pain, or I suffer the consequences of losing his or her trust over time as I demonstrate that I won't honor their values, that I won't respect the things that matter to them or that affect them.
Wow. Really, really beautiful. And I actually did interview the author of Don't Sweat the Small Stuff a long time ago before he died. So we human beings are meaning-making creatures. And so we make meaning from everything. So it's not about the dish, but it's about what it means, and it represents pain. And you're saying it so well, Matthew, and it makes such a difference that it's coming from you as a male. I am an expert in gender studies, and I don't mean to generalize, but we can generalize just as a starting point. That's okay. So what I say to my couples, which is not with enough verve as you are saying it, is that it's not about the intention, it's about the impact, and to separate out the two. And yes, your partner didn't intend to hurt you, but they hurt you very much anyway. So what do? We should on people. We say, you shouldn't feel that way. I didn't mean it. I'm innocent. What if there's something wrong with you, right? There's something wrong with you. And then we go on and on, the merry-go-round fights, the perennial fights. And so what can we do to change this in your view? Here's a couple who are having this fight. And by the way, I do want to underscore what you said about the man perceiving that he's being attacked and criminalized and all of that. And he's so innocent. And there are these kind of crude cartoons about likening men to dogs, that all you hear is good dog or bad dog. and that's all have you ever seen those kinds of cartoons?
I haven't, but that checks out.
It checks out, right? The idea of the tone. A man doesn't hear the details, but he hears if you're a good dog or you're a bad dog. So go ahead.
No, the way that I approach it today, and as I think you're aware, I work as a relationship coach, which makes me this amateur knockoff version of all the experts in the field, including yourself. But I'm here for the person that wants to talk to somebody that they feel like we're maybe at the pub having a drink together or something, because that's how I want to be in the world. I definitely don't want to come off as if I holier than thou, or I think I know more. I'm just here to help a person who asks for it and nothing more. A person who thinks they might benefit from my experience because it seems so similar to theirs. I think about habits, and it was interesting because I was listening to, and I'm so sorry that I can't remember the good doctor's name, but she was discussing the idea of habit formation within like a 21 to 30 day period. And I thought it was so powerful. And you guys in that same conversation in that show talked about how people in the absence of being rebellious don't stray too far outside their norm. So I think that the average guy growing up in the United States, at least here where we live, and certainly many other countries, there's a sort of like way we relate emotionally. There's a relational skill gap, in my estimation, between what the standard is for the young woman who's raised societally versus the young man. There's like a different standard, and that standard handicaps the boy as he becomes a young man and heads into relationships and doesn't know how to deal with it. And I like to defend that young person's character because they don't know. They don't associate this absence of relational skill with doing harm. They don't associate it with being bad or like causing damage to their relationships and or specifically their relationship partner. I believe they have habits, not character defects. And these habits, two specifically, that erode trust over time in relationships are habit one, this invalidation habit. He doesn't think of it as invalidation. He thinks of it as disagreeing. And the second one is this absence of consideration. And so those are the two habits on which I focus on my work. And I'm like encouraging people, practice this 30, 60, 90, however many days it takes until this becomes part of your life. And what does that look like? Well, I talk about this validation pattern that we have, and I've like sort of dubbed it juvenilely the invalidation triple threat. It's the three ways I believe people invalidate relationship partners when they disagree with them. And it's, if we're going to stereotype, if we're going to generalize, it's very, very frequently the male partner doing it to his female partner in male-female relationships. What it looked like in my life is my wife would come to me and she would say, "Hey, Matt, I'm having a problem. Something happened. It was bad for me. This is me telling you about it." I assume the hope is to recruit me to understand the problem so that moving forward, I'll cooperate with her. I'll change something. She's probably giving me the benefit of the doubt. She probably thinks I don't know. So she's going to let me know. She's trying to recruit me to help her moving forward. Everything would be great if that would happen, but that's not what happens. The three ways we respond are, at least I don't want to blame everybody. My wife would say, "Hey, this bad thing happened. I feel bad about it." And version one of this invalidation triple threat is I would disagree with some facet of my wife's story. Like something that she thought happened and be like, "Wait a minute, that's actually not what happened." And I'd reframe it. "Here's what happened." The math result of that conversation is your emotions, your emotional experience, your feelings don't matter because they're based on something that isn't real. So I would like challenge the intellectual experience she had. Version two, my wife comes to me and says, "Matt, I have this problem. This thing happened. I feel bad about it." And I would say, "Okay, that's what happened, but why are you making such a big deal out of it? Why are you making this minor thing so huge?" The math result is your feelings are incorrect. They're not fair. There's something wrong with your emotional calibration and you need to fix it. Version three is defensiveness. It's, "Hey, I didn't mean to do that. If you understand what I was trying to do or what I believed at the time or what my choices were, then you won't be mad at me anymore." This, right? Like I didn't do anything wrong, or even if like this bad thing happened to you, if you just understand why I did it that way, you'll get it. Anyway, what all three of these response patterns over time communicate is, I will always choose me over you. My wife could not trust that if something bad was happening to her, if she was experiencing a negative, like emotional experience, and she shared it with me to try to get her husband to help change something in our shared lives moving forward, if I didn't agree with something about what she thought or something about what she felt, I would always choose what I wanted or what I felt over her. And she learned that over thousands of conversations, over 12, 13 years together. And a person finally realizes, if I don't get my partner's stamp of approval that I'm allowed to experience what I experience, he or she says I'm stupid, I'm crazy, I'm weak, I'm wrong, or that regardless, they're justified in doing things the way they do them. They'll always choose themselves over me. I either have to sign up to feel hurt forever, or I've got to do the painful thing and break this relationship and walk away. Anyway, that's the choice I left my wife with. Two awful choices: sacrificing half of her son's childhood or staying in a relationship that hurt her a little bit every day.
Wow. So well put, this triple invalidation threat. And I say to my clients, we don't have to agree, but we do have to validate. We don't have to agree. They're different. And most people will say, if I don't agree with you, it's an automatic invalidation. It's knee-jerk automatic invalidation. And even the concept of separating those two out is huge. So we've already separated out intention and impact. It's not my intention but to hurt you, but the impact on you nevertheless is to be hurt, and to honor that, and to separate out agreement from validation. I don't speak in absolutes, but I do speak in absolutes about this point to my clients. We never have to agree with our partner, but we always have to validate them. So that's the story. And it is just so common, Matt. It's just so common, the idea of he thinks that she's telling him he's wrong. And she is, as you put it, requesting help. She's requesting him to enter into her feeling field, her need for help. For instance, one of my clients told me the other day that the roof was leaking. And she told her husband the roof was leaking. He had a reaction to it, but he didn't do anything about it. So she goes back to him a little while later and says, well, are you going to, call this person? Okay, nothing. Later, well, did you call this person? No, I didn't. But then he calls. And this is the kind of thing that to me is so unnecessary. I think that life causes so much stress as it is. Why do this? Yeah. And before you respond, Matthew Fray, author of This Is How Your Marriage Ends, because we have only a couple of minutes left, the good news to everybody is that Matthew is coming back next week, and we're going to have a second in a 2-part series. So that's the frustration that I constantly hear. Why do this? Isn't life stressful enough?
And in my work, that's a really powerful sort of like anecdote to me. It reinforces that when I, the wife, ask my husband or communicate to my husband that there's a problem, I can't trust him to do anything about it. If I nudge him, encourage him, remind him, I'm perceived as nagging, attacking. There's no way to win. There's absolutely no way. And then it ultimately, I think, comes down to this idea of like reliability, consistency. Like, can I count on this person? So when I talk about trust erosion in relationships, I don't necessarily mean trust as in this person's dishonest or this person behaves in a way that's deceitful. It's often not that. It is exactly the scenario you just laid out. I can't trust my husband to be an equal and cooperative partner to me, a supportive partner to me, when life throws something at me or at us. It feels like it's always on me and or if it's not, like, it causes so much conflict, like the moment that you're talking about. And I probably did that exact same thing. Not about a leaking roof necessarily, but about a light bulb I didn't change, or about a deck I didn't want to stain this weekend versus 2 weeks from now or something. And I don't know. I'm not saying it was on me to do what my wife wanted when she wanted. It was on me to honor the experience and cooperate. And we didn't really deep dive on consideration, but that's where that lives. The habit of considering is to calculate accurately for the experience someone else will have when I do or not do something. Like, it's on the husband to know when she says, hey, roof's leaking in our shared domicile, and he's like sloughs it off. A healthy relationship is comprised of somebody that knows how she'll or he'll, if that's what it is, will feel about it, like when I'm going to ignore it and pretend like that didn't happen. That's the work of trust restoration and or maintaining it in relationships. Is I validate emotional experiences, and I can be counted on to vigilantly consider my partner's experiences and behave in a way that calculates for them, in a way that feels like care. And the absence of consideration and care was what kills people slowly over time.
Wow, this is so important, Matthew. And the good news is we're going to be coming back next week with part 2, because I have a zillion questions to ask you and a zillion comments to make. But I am thinking how men can feel so feminized when they do what the wife says. By the way, men are never called nags, only women, right? That's number one. And the joke about, yes, dear, yes, dear, yes, dear. So now I'm being pee-whipped, okay? I am less than a man because I have to say less dear, which puts the woman down, that she is this dominant person, and puts him down, that he can't speak up for himself. So we have to close. And the good news for everyone, tune in next week for the second part of Matthew Fray's book, This Is How Your Marriage Ends, a hopeful approach to saving relationships. And this is Dr. Duffy Spencer saying goodbye for now and wishing you great relationships.